picture this scenario, if you would. You're sitting alone at a small, maybe slightly uneven wooden table in a busy, sunlit coffee shop.
Okay, yeah, I can picture that.
And the air around you is just thick. It's carrying that really rich, dark, heavily roasted scent of espresso.
Oh, that is the best smell.
Right. And all around you, there is this incredibly intricate symphony of everyday life just unfolding.
Like the background noise of the cafe.
Exactly. You can hear the rhythmic, metallic clinking of ceramic mugs against saucers. There's the sharp, sudden hiss of the steam wand from behind the counter.
Yeah, that sudden burst of steam.
And you hear the low, steady, just sort of blending hum of dozens of conversations overlapping into this comfortable, almost hypnotic white noise.
It's a very peaceful aesthetic, very grounding.
It really is. And you reach for your iced drink and you can actually feel the condensation that's formed on the outside of the glass.
Yeah.
A single cold drip slides slowly down onto your fingers, which is the sharp contrast to the warmth of the room.
So outwardly, to anyone looking at you, everything is perfectly fine.
Totally fine. You look like just another person enjoying a quiet Tuesday afternoon, totally integrated into the peaceful vibe of the cafe.
But inwardly, I'm guessing it's a completely different story.
Oh, inwardly, a Category 5 hurricane is making a landfall. It's just tearing through your cognitive landscape.
Wow, okay, so a massive contrast there.
That is the exact contrast we're exploring today. You are staring at your phone, or maybe just staring blankly out the window, and you are trapped.
Trapped in your own head.
Yeah, you're spiraling in the absolute center of a quarter life or maybe a midlife crisis. Your chest feels incredibly tight.
Like there are heavy iron bands wrapped around your ribs or something.
Exactly, just restricting your lungs. Your breathing has become shallow, and your mind is sprinting on this high-speed treadmill of a million terrifying what-ifs.
Oh, the what-ifs are the worst.
They really are. Like, what if I chose the wrong career path 5 years ago? What if this relationship I'm in is fundamentally doomed? What if my best, most vibrant years are already in the rearview mirror?
So the physical reality is a coffee shop, but your mental reality is an absolute disaster zone.
Yes, exactly. And then you glance over at the person sitting at the very next table.
And how are they doing?
That person sitting there is a portrait of complete tranquility.
Of course they are.
They are drinking the exact same coffee. They are sitting in the exact same room, breathing the exact same espresso-scented air.
So the sensory inputs are absolutely identical.
Identical, yet they look completely at peace. They're happily watching the world go by, maybe lightly tapping their foot to the background music, totally unbothered.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does. How is it physiologically and psychologically possible for two human beings to exist in the exact same physical reality at the exact same moment in time, receiving the exact same sensory data, yet experience two entirely different polarizing worlds?
It's perhaps the ultimate human paradox, and honestly, it forms the entire foundation of our exploration today.
Which is such a fascinating topic.
It really is. We've gathered this incredible stack of cognitive psychology research, behavioral science data, and philosophical observations to unpack what I like to call the hidden architecture of human suffering.
The hidden architecture, I like that phrasing.
Yeah, specifically, we're going to look at the mechanics of how our own minds, which are often operating entirely in the background without our conscious permission, trap us in these exhausting, repetitive loops of despair and anxiety.
It's so exhausting.
But more importantly, the mission here is to synthesize these materials to reveal a radically simple, biologically grounded way to step out of that loop.
Right, to actually break free from it.
Exactly. We're looking at how to return to a baseline state of natural clarity and joy.
And I want to speak directly to you, the person listening to this right now. If you are fatigued by your own mental noise, the objective of our time together today is not to hand you some list of toxic positivity affirmations.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
We are not interested in teaching you how to artificially force a smile or, fake your way into a good mood while ignoring your actual problem.
Because that never works long-term anyway.
It never works. We're looking at the mechanics of the brain to discover how to unlock the peace that is actually already sitting right there, perfectly intact, just beneath the surface of all that exhausting cognitive friction.
To really grasp the mechanics of this, we have to start with a foundational premise that sort of shakes up how most of us assume we interact with the world.
Okay, lay it on me.
The premise is this: we do not actually live an objective reality.
Wait, really?
Yeah, We live entirely within our perception of reality,
Mhm.
and that perception is a closed-loop simulation, 100% constructed by our internal thought processes.
Wow. Okay, so it's a subtle but crucial distinction. We are separating the objective, raw data of the physical room from the subjective emotional overlay we just instantly automatically apply to it.
That is the biological reality of the situation, yeah. Think back to the coffee shop example you just gave.
Right.
The physical components of that coffee shop are completely neutral.
Like the table and the cup.
Exactly. The wooden table has no emotional valence. The smell of the coffee is just a chemical compound interacting with your olfactory receptors.
It doesn't care if you're happy or sad.
Right. The distress you are feeling in that moment is not radiating from the environment. It's not emitting from the job market or from the unread email sitting on your phone server.
Or the ticking clock on the wall.
Nope. The distress is being manufactured entirely by your internal interpretation of those neutral data points.
So the person sitting next to you has a different interpretive filter running, so their brain constructs a completely different world.
Exactly.
So the outside world provides raw material. It doesn't have a built-in emotional temperature
Yeah.
until our cognitive processes assign one to it.
Yes, and we assign that temperature based on our past experiences, our fears, and our current physiological state.
That makes a lot of sense.
There is a classic concept in behavioral psychology and philosophy that illustrates this architecture beautifully. It's often referred to as the concept of the two arrows.
The two arrows, okay, how does that work?
It suggests that whenever something difficult, painful, or unfortunate happens to us in life, there are essentially two arrows that fly our way.
Okay, so what's the first arrow?
The first arrow makes sense. It represents the unavoidable pain of the event itself. It's the physical or situational reality.
Like if you get a flat tire on the highway in the freezing rain.
Yes, or you're laid off from a job you financially depended on. Or you experience a physical injury like spraining your ankle.
Ouch.
Being struck by this first arrow triggers a very real, very biological, acute stress response. It is painful.
Right, it's the inevitable friction of existing in a physical universe. We can't control the first arrow. Life simply happens.
Metal pierces rubber, companies restructure. That acute pain is a biological certainty.
Okay, so we all get hit by the first arrow. What's the second arrow?
But then comes the second arrow. The second arrow is our complex emotional and psychological reaction to the first arrow. It's the narrative. It's that dense, heavy story. Our prefrontal cortex instantly begins to spin about what the first arrow actually means for our core worth, our identity, and our long-term survival.
So the first arrow is the punctured tire on the asphalt.
Yes.
And the second arrow is the cascading thought process like, I'm always having terrible luck. My boss is definitely going to fire me for being late today. I am a fundamental failure who can't even maintain a vehicle properly. My entire life is falling apart.
Exactly. The first arrow is an inconvenience on the highway. The second arrow is a full-blown existential crisis generated entirely in the passenger seat.
Wow. That is such a clear way to put it.
And the profound realization that these behavioral researchers keep pointing to is this. The first arrow is inevitable. We all get hit by it. But the second arrow is entirely optional.
Optional, really?
Yes, it is manufactured by our own psychological filter.
Let's look at a very concrete, everyday example of this filter operating in real time, just to make sure we're fully grasping this.
Good idea.
Imagine you are stuck in gridlocked, bumper-to-bumper traffic on your evening commute.
Ugh, the worst.
Right. So the physical reality, the first arrow, is simply that there are heavy metal boxes sitting stationary on a strip of asphalt. That is the objective data.
Okay.
Now observe driver A. Driver A is gripping the steering wheel with such intensity that their knuckles are turning white.
Oh, we've all been driver A.
We definitely have. Their sympathetic nervous system is in overdrive, their blood pressure is spiking, cortisol is just flooding their bloodstream.
And what are they thinking about?
They are furiously projecting into the future, imagining their evening being totally ruined, cursing city planners, sweating, and feeling utterly miserable.
And then let's analyze driver B, who is positioned in the exact same traffic jam, merely 2 cars back.
Okay, what is driver B doing?
Driver B has their seat leaned back comfortably. They're tapping their fingers rhythmically on the dashboard.
Wow, quite the contrast.
Yeah, they are genuinely smiling because they realize they finally have a rare, uninterrupted 45-minute window to llisten to a new album they've been meaning to check out all week.
That's amazing. So the traffic, the physical reality, the raw sensory data of the red taillights and the stationary cars is absolutely identical for both individuals.
Totally identical.
But the internal world, the physiological state, and the lived experience is the complete opposite.
When we map this onto the broader human experience, it demonstrates that our feelings do not originate from external events.
They don't?
No, our feelings are generated by what we think about those external events.
Ah,
If we survey 100 different people about a prominent political figure or a massive cultural event, we'll record 100 different, highly emotional, visceral responses.
because everyone has a different filter.
Exactly. The figure or the event is the same neutral entity existing in objective reality, but the internal filters of those 100 people construct 100 distinct, very real emotional realities.
This brings up a critical friction point, though.
Okay, what's that?
If we take this framework and apply it to someone who is enduring genuine hardship, we have to be really careful.
Yes, absolutely.
I often wonder if someone is experiencing a real-world tragedy, systemic injustice, or profound grief, telling them that their suffering is just a perception, or all in their head runs the risk of sounding incredibly dismissive.
It does.
It edges dangerously close to toxic positivity,
Yeah.
How do these psychological models validate real visceral pain while still recognizing this internal manufacturing process?
That is a vital distinction to make, and the literature is very clear on this boundary.
Good.
Validating the internal filter does not mean claiming that hardship is an illusion or that real-world systemic problems do not exist.
Because they definitely do exist.
If you accidentally place your hand on a hot stove, the tissue damage and the immediate neurological pain signals are incredibly real. That is the first arrow.
We validate the first arrow completely.
Exactly. Pain is a mandatory part of the human condition. But suffering defined in this context as the prolonged, heavy psychological agony that stretches on for days, months, or years after the event, that is the component manufactured by the filter.
So we're talking about the fact that while the acute pain of the burn is mandatory, the prolonged suffering is optional.
Yes.
That tracks perfectly with what we see in trauma recovery models. The pain of the burn is a biological fact.
Absolutely.
But lying awake for 3 consecutive weeks, agonizing over how foolish you were to touch the stove, projecting that you will always be a clumsy failure, and mentally replaying the accident thousands of times, that is the suffering.
That is the second arrow.
Right, it's the rumination, not the initial injury.
Exactly. And if our perception, this internal filter, is the engine that manufactures that heavy optional suffering, we have to isolate the mechanism.
Right, what's actually under the hood.
What exactly is the machinery inside our cognition doing the manufacturing?
This is where the research introduces a distinction that completely recontextualizes how we view our own cognitive processes.
It really does.
It's a massive fundamental difference between thoughts used as a noun and thinking used as an active verb.
It is arguably the most transformative concept we will analyze today.
I agree. In everyday language, we use the words interchangeably, don't we?
We do, but neurologically and experientially, they are entirely different phenomena.
Okay, break that down for us. What are thoughts, the noun?
Thoughts, the noun, are natural passing occurrences. They are the spontaneous firings of the brain's default mode network.
So they just happen on their own.
Yeah, they are raw, energetic material popping into your consciousness. They require absolutely zero effort, intention, or caloric energy on your part.
You don't ask for them.
You do not ask for them. You do not consciously build them. They just arrive. They pass through the mind, much like weather passes through a sky.
They are completely spontaneous, like you're walking down the street looking at a tree and suddenly a thought pops up.
Like, I should call my grandmother.
Yeah, or I wonder what the capital of Peru is, or even a deeply negative one like, what if I fail this upcoming presentation? It just appears on the screen of your mind.
And simply experiencing a thought, even a dark or negative one, does not inherently cause physiological suffering.
It doesn't.
No. The suffering initiates when we engage in thinking.
The verb.
Thinking, the verb, is the active, strenuous, manual labor of engaging with, judging, analyzing, wrestling with, and attempting to solve those spontaneous thoughts.
So it's the wrestling.
Yes. Thinking requires a tremendous amount of working memory, willpower, and metabolic energy.
Let's run a real-time experiment with you, the listener, right now to isolate this exact biological shift.
I love this experiment.
I want you to pause for a second and think about the exact amount of money you would love to make this year. Your absolute dream, ideal, sky is the limit annual income. Just let the number pop into your head right now.
Pay close attention to how that initial number, the spontaneous thought, feels in your body.
It likely feels very light,
Yeah.
right?
It feels neutral, or perhaps even exciting and expansive. It took zero cognitive effort for your brain to produce that number.
But notice what happens almost immediately, often within milliseconds. The thinking begins. The active verb kicks into gear.
Oh yeah, the machinery starts up.
The prefrontal cortex starts grinding. How will I actually do that? I'm not qualified for a raise of that size. The macroeconomic environment is terrible right now.
I don't have the right degree to pivot industries. People will judge me and think I'm greedy. This is a foolish fantasy.
And monitor the physiological shift that accompanied that sequence. You likely transition from feeling light, expansive, and relaxed with the initial spontaneous thought to feeling a sense of heaviness.
Heaviness, restriction, anxiety, and physical tension the moment the act of thinking started.
Your sympathetic nervous system began to activate.
The initial thought, the noun, did not hurt you. The active, exhausting verb of thinking about the thought, analyzing it to death, is what dragged your system into suffering.
It's as if our brain takes a perfectly fine piece of raw, neutral material and just throws it into an industrial wood chipper.
That's a great visual.
To conceptualize this cognitive load, researchers often use the analogy of a dashboard inside your mind, featuring a prominent thoughtometer.
Yes, the thoughtometer. It looks remarkably like a car's tachometer or speedometer.
But instead of measuring revolutions per minute or miles per hour, it measures thoughts per minute.
And the intensity of our negative emotional states is directly correlated to how high the needle is pushed on that thoughtometer.
So when we actively engage in the verb of thinking, when we're relentlessly analyzing, criticizing ourselves, projecting disaster into the future,
And endlessly dissecting past interactions, that needle revs up. It climbs higher and higher into the red zone.
when you run a car engine in the red zone for an extended period, the mechanics begin to break down. This system literally overheats.
It does.
In human biology, we experience that overheating as chronic stress, generalized anxiety, deep frustration, and eventual burnout.
What is so fascinating is that it's not necessarily the content of what we're thinking about that causes the breakdown.
Really, it's not the content.
No, it's the sheer volume, velocity, and friction of the act of thinking itself. The cognitive machinery is just running too hot.
When you feel deeply overwhelmed or chronically fatigued, it's often simply your internal dashboard signaling that your engine is overheating.
You're revving the active verb of thinking far beyond its sustainable capacity. The allostatic load on your nervous system is completely maxed out.
This naturally leads to a massive contradiction, though.
What's that?
If the active verb of thinking is what overheats our engine, floods us with cortisol, and makes us miserable, why are we so biologically addicted to doing it?
That is the million-dollar question.
Why do we construct our entire identities around these exhausting mental loops? If it hurts, why can't we just take our foot off the gas and stop revving the engine?
To answer that, we have to examine the fundamental nature of the human mind from an evolutionary perspective.
Okay, take us back.
The mind operates essentially as a highly efficient factory of attention and meditation.
Meditation.
Yes. Whatever we focus our attention on, whatever we actively meditate on throughout the waking hours, will neurologically magnify and dominate our perceived reality.
I always find the use of the word meditation in this context so striking. We usually associate meditation with sitting peacefully on a cushion in a silent room.
Right, with incense and a gong.
Exactly. But these behavioral models point out that we are always meditating.
We are.
If you're obsessing for 6 hours over a mildly passive-aggressive comment a coworker made in a morning meeting, you are quite literally meditating on resentment.
You're focusing your attention and building neural pathways around that specific anger.
That is the perfect way to frame it. The mind acts as a magnifying glass.
And from an evolutionary standpoint, we must remember that the brain's primary overriding objective is not to make us happy, fulfilled, or peaceful.
It's not.
No. Its sole evolutionary mandate is to keep us alive long enough to pass on our genes.
Survival.
To ensure survival in a historically dangerous world, the brain is hardwired to constantly scan the environment for threats. This is the well-documented negativity bias.
We all know the basic mechanics of the evolutionary negativity bias. It's hardwired to keep us alive. But what is truly fascinating when looking at modern behavioral data is how this ancient mechanism gets hijacked by modern abstract threats.
It really does.
It's why you can give a presentation to an audience of 50 people and 49 of them are nodding, smiling, and taking notes, but there was one person in the back row who was frowning and checking their watch.
And who do we remember when we go home?
Who do we obsess over? The one frowner.
Every single time.
Ancient survival logic dictates that the smiling people aren't going to eat us, so we can ignore them. But the frowner represents a potential exclusion from the tribe, which historically meant death.
So the brain fixates on the negative anomaly.
Because the brain is so obsessively focused on threat detection and safety, when we experience a failure, a rejection, or a trauma, the mind doesn't just process the event and cleanly move on.
No, it utilizes neuroplasticity to build fortresses.
Fortresses.
Yeah, it creates what psychologists often refer to as core schemas or nuclear beliefs.
Nuclear beliefs.
These are deeply rigid, baked-in identities formed from past pain, designed to prevent future pain.
Like what?
They manifest as deeply held beliefs like, I am a fundamental failure, I am inherently unlovable, I must be absolutely perfect to avoid being abandoned, or the world is an intrinsically dangerous and hostile place.
And once those nuclear beliefs are neurologically established, our internal factory of attention goes to work.
It works over time.
The brain begins to actively filter reality, seeking out any evidence to prove those negative beliefs right over and over again, while discarding evidence to the contrary.
Which brings in an incredibly vivid analogy to illustrate how we maladaptively cope with this.
I love this analogy.
Attempting to control or analyze these negative, fear-based thoughts is akin to trying to pacify a hungry, aggressive tiger cub.
It perfectly captures the mechanics of rumination. Imagine you have a tiny, highly aggressive tiger cub pacing around your living room.
Okay, I see you.
This cub represents your baseline anxiety or a specific fear. It is roaring, it's scratching at your legs, it's relentlessly demanding your attention.
And it's scary, even if it's small.
Very scary. In an attempt to calm the immediate distress, you throw the cub a piece of raw meat.
In our cognitive model, that meat represents your active thinking.
Right.
It represents your deep analysis, your rationalizations, your attempts to logically figure out and solve the anxiety.
And in the very short term, it appears to work. The cub eats the meat, gets distracted, and quiets down.
Your brain gets a tiny hit of dopamine.
You sit back and think, I successfully analyzed my anxiety. I figured out exactly why my boss looked at me weird. I planned out 6 different contingency scenarios. The problem is solved.
But the biological reality soon sets in.
Because the tiger digests the meat, gets hungry again, and returns.
Only this time, because you fed it a high-calorie meal, it has grown. It's a little bigger, a little stronger, and its roar is a little louder.
To quiet it down this time, you have to throw it a significantly larger piece of meat.
You have to engage in even more analysis, more overthinking, more complex contingency planning.
You repeat this cycle, day after day, year after year, building thicker and thicker neural pathways.
Until one day, you find yourself standing in front of a massive, overpowering, 1,000-pound adult tiger that completely dominates your cognitive landscape.
When you lay it out like that, it totally recontextualizes what we're doing when we lie awake in bed at 3 a.m.
We're just staring at the ceiling.
Desperately trying to solve our existential dread by thinking about it from every conceivable angle, creating elaborate pro and con lists in the dark.
We genuinely believe we are doing the necessary work to solve the problem.
But we aren't solving anything. We're literally just passing juicy, calorie-dense steaks to the tiger.
That is the exact trap of the analytical mind. We are attempting to fix a thinking problem by utilizing more thinking.
It's the functional equivalent of trying to extinguish a roaring grease fire by pouring a bucket of gasoline onto it.
The more you feed the loop of overanalysis, the more cognitive paralysis sets in.
You become trapped in a state of chronic hypervigilance, completely exhausted by your own mind's well-intentioned but highly destructive attempt to keep you safe from perceived threats.
This realization requires a massive pivot in strategy.
It really does. If we cannot think our way out of our negative beliefs, if logically analyzing our anxiety just makes the tiger stronger and more demanding.
How do we actually step out of that loop without fighting it?
Right. How do we break out of the fortress our own neuroplasticity has built?
We step out of the loop through a well-documented psychological mechanism known as cognitive diffusion.
Cognitive diffusion.
The foundational key to dismantling these toxic nuclear beliefs is internalizing a profound biologically accurate truth.
Which is?
You are not your thoughts.
You are not your thoughts.
You are the conscious observer of your thoughts. We must break the emotional fusion, that tight, suffocating fused bond between our core sense of identity and the passing neurological noise generated by the default mode network.
The mechanics of cognitive diffusion rely on a tiny but incredibly powerful linguistic shift in how we structure our internal dialogue.
Give us an example.
Let's say you make a significant mistake on a project at work. The fused automatic limbic reaction is to immediately state, I am a massive disaster.
Right. In that moment, you merge your entire identity with the temporary mistake. You literally become the disaster.
But applying cognitive diffusion introduces a vital metacognitive gap.
Instead of automatically declaring, I am a disaster, you intentionally shift your internal language and framing.
To what?
To, I am currently having the thought that I am a disaster.
I am having the thought it sounds so simple, almost too simple, but just hearing that phrasing out loud feels entirely different.
It creates massive internal distance.
It takes this suffocating, absolute, heavy truth, I am a disaster, and immediately downgrades it into a passing, harmless observation.
It transforms an identity crisis into a mere data point floating through the cognitive system.
To really understand why creating this spatial distance in the mind is so effective, researchers frequently utilize a striking sensory metaphor to map abstract metacognition onto something tangible.
Yes, they ask us to visualize a chessboard.
I can picture it clearly. The classic rigid grid of alternating black and white squares.
On this conceptual board, the white pieces represent all of your positive, joyful, productive, and confident thoughts.
They are the thoughts you want to keep.
Exactly. And the black pieces represent your negative, anxious, self-deprecating, and highly fearful thoughts.
They are the thoughts you wish would disappear.
The tragic reality is that the vast majority of human beings spend their entire lives implicitly believing that they are the pieces on the board. Consequently, they spend their limited energy fighting a constant, exhausting, lifelong war on the board, desperately trying to help the white pieces conquer and defeat the black pieces.
The ultimate goal of this fused state is to ensure the good thoughts win and the bad thoughts die.
Right. The internal landscape becomes a perpetual, exhausting battleground. You're constantly policing your own mind.
But here is the liberating structural truth of the metaphor. You are not the white pieces.
And you are most certainly not the black pieces either.
You are the board.
You are the board.
That visual is incredibly grounding. You are the solid wooden structure that simply provides the space for all the pieces to exist.
The board itself does not care who is winning the game.
The board isn't structurally damaged when a black knight takes a white pawn.
Not at all.
The chaotic war is raging on top of it, the pieces are moving and clashing, but the wood remains completely unharmed, untouched, and stable beneath it all.
The board merely provides the context, the space for the game to occur.
When we begin to actually identify as the board, our entire behavioral strategy shifts, doesn't it?
Completely. We stop fighting the black pieces. We stop trying to forcefully shove them off the edge.
We just let them sit there.
We observe them without getting drawn into the emotional gravity of the battle.
This fundamentally changes how we view our own emotional taxonomy.
How so?
When someone states, I am deeply depressed or I am an anxious person, they have literally dressed themselves up in the black pieces.
They've convinced their nervous system that they are the dark knight or the black rook.
But if they realize they are the board, the anxiety is suddenly just a piece sitting on square D4.
It's there, you can see it clearly, you acknowledge its presence, but it does not define the fundamental nature of the wood. It does not define you.
And internalizing this perspective leads us directly to the practical, physical action we must take when that anxiety monster or those aggressive black pieces start pulling hard on our physiological responses.
Because it's one thing to philosophically agree that you're the board while sitting in a calm room.
It's an entirely different challenge to know what to do when the cortisol hits and the panic actually sets in.
That is exactly where the rubber meets the road.
When the tiger is actively roaring in your living room, what is the actual mechanical move?
The required move is rooted in understanding the paradox of control.
The paradox of control.
Anxiety thrives on our resistance to it. The more aggressively we fight the feeling, the stronger the neurological pathway becomes.
We see this manifested incredibly clearly in behaviors like perfectionism and absolute black and white thinking.
Cognitive patterns like, I must absolutely win this interaction, or this creative project must be flawless, or my reputation is entirely ruined.
These are simply highly destructive, maladaptive forms of trying to exert control over a fundamentally uncontrollable universe.
To visualize this resistance, we can look at another incredibly potent framework from behavioral analysis.
The tug of war.
Yes. I want you to imagine you are locked in a literal high-stakes tug of war.
Okay. Pulling a rope.
On the opposite end of a thick, heavy, abrasive rope is a massive, terrifying monster.
That monster visually represents your anxiety, your deep fear of failure, your imposter syndrome, or your perfectionism.
And situated right between you and this monster is a seemingly bottomless pit.
So the stakes are high.
Very high. You are pulling on that rope with every single ounce of your physical and emotional might.
You are absolutely terrified that if you lose the tension, if you slip even an inch, the monster will drag you into the pit.
Your hands are burning and bleeding from the friction of the rough rope. Your heels are frantically slipping in the dirt.
You're pouring your entire life force into fighting this monster. But the monster possesses infinite stamina.
The harder you pull, the harder the monster pulls back.
You are living your entire life in a constant, unbroken state of extreme muscular and psychological tension.
If you ask the average motivational speaker or hustle culture advocate what the solution is, what will they tell you?
They will almost universally tell you to pull harder, dig deeper, grind it out and defeat the monster. They advocate for more resistance.
But the true scientifically grounded solution, the only mechanism that actually terminates the suffering, is completely counterintuitive to our survival instincts.
What is it?
The solution is to simply drop the rope.
Drop the rope. Just physically open your hands and let the rough fibers go.
The biological reality of dropping the rope is profound. When you let go, you do not defeat the monster.
The monster doesn't magically vanish.
But the monster instantly loses all of its tension and mechanical power over you. The physical battle abruptly ends.
You can step back from the edge of the pit.
The monster might still be standing there on the other side yelling at you, demanding you pick the rope back up. But you are no longer physically engaged in a life-or-death, exhausting struggle with it.
This maps so perfectly onto the ongoing debate between perfectionism versus excellence.
It really does.
The rigid perfectionist is pulling on that heavy rope for dear life. They're operating like a dry, brittle branch on a tree.
They demand total rigidity and control over their environment.
But when the inevitable wind of reality blows, when something unpredictable happens, a project fails, a relationship hits turbulence, that brittle branch simply snaps.
It breaks under the pressure.
But the flexible person, the individual who genuinely strives for excellence but drops the heavy rope of demanding perfect control, they operate like a green reed.
That is an excellent biomechanical comparison. The green reed bends almost completely flat to the ground when the hurricane winds blow.
It does not fight the wind, so it does not break.
And when the storm eventually passes, it naturally stands right back up.
Psychological flexibility is the ultimate form of strength. Dropping the rope is the ultimate act of cognitive flexibility.
But practically speaking, I have to play out the skeptical angle here.
I was hoping you would.
If I totally drop this catastrophizing, I worry I'm just going to lose my edge. How do I drop the rope when my startup is running out of funding, or my boss is demanding a massive deliverable by Friday, or I have a mortgage to pay and a family to feed? If I am not stressed about my startup failing, will I even work the 80 hours a week needed to make it survive? I can't just abandon my responsibilities and say, oh, well, the monster can have it. I'm just chilling as the chessboard.
That is the most common and most understandable fear when people first encounter this concept.
It feels risky.
It does, but it relies on a false equivalence. Dropping the rope does not mean abandoning the action.
What does it mean then?
It means letting go of the catastrophizing obsession over the outcome. It is a fundamental shift in your internal dialogue.
Okay, so a shift from what to what?
It moves from, I must execute this project perfectly right now, everyone must validate it, or my entire life is ruined and I am worthless, to a much healthier stance.
Like, I am going to put my absolute highest effort and focus into this project, but I accept that sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, and my fundamental human worth is not dependent on this single outcome.
That makes perfect sense. You still build the presentation, you still pay the bills, you still put in the long hours at the startup.
But you drop the heavy, suffocating narrative that your literal survival and core identity depend on flawless execution.
You engage fully in the action, but you detach your ego from the agonizing, cyclical thinking about the action.
Exactly. You do the necessary, rigorous work in the physical world, but you completely refuse to feed the tiger in the mental world.
Even with that clarification, this raises a terrifying prospect for high-achieving individuals.
It does.
If we drop the rope, if we intentionally stop the overanalysis, if we stop letting the acute fear of failure serve as our primary fuel source, what happens to our drive?
Does our ambition evaporate?
Right. Do we just become passive observers of our lives, sitting on the couch, entirely unmotivated to achieve any significant goals?
That is the ego's absolute greatest fear, and the behavioral data shows it is entirely a myth.
It's a myth.
Yes, relinquishing the grip of overthinking does not extinguish our ambition. It actually purifies it.
Purifies it.
When we stop manufacturing our own suffering, when we drop that heavy rope, we experience a profound structural shift in the why behind our actions.
We transition from pursuing goals based on desperation to pursuing goals based on inspiration.
Desperation versus inspiration. We need to break down the mechanics of that shift because the research is very clear that the psychological source of our motivation fundamentally dictates how the entire journey will feel to our nervous system.
Let's analyze desperation first. Desperation-based goals are born from a place of deep psychological lack, chronic fear, and a frantic, urgent need to escape your current reality.
It's driven by the thought process of, I need to secure this executive promotion so my peers will finally respect me and I won't feel so incredibly inadequate.
Or, I need to accumulate $10 million so I can finally build a fortress and feel safe from a hostile world.
Goals fueled by desperation feel incredibly heavy. They are accompanied by a constant sense of restriction, urgency, and exhaustion.
You might actually achieve them. Fear is a potent, albeit toxic, fuel, but the entire process feels exactly like pulling that monster across the pit.
You're white-knuckling your way through a decade of your life, soaking your brain in cortisol.
Conversely, inspiration-based goals originate from our natural baseline state of cognitive peace.
They arise from intrinsic motivation, from pure creativity and curiosity.
It's the thought process of, I want to build this specific software architecture because the logistical problem fascinates me, and the act of coding it brings me a deep sense of joy.
Or I want to write this novel because I have a complex story bubbling up inside my imagination, and it would be deeply fulfilling to put it on paper.
Inspiration goals feel completely expansive to the nervous system.
They are characterized by high energy, weightlessness, and a sense of infinite creative possibility.
There's no underlying fear of scarcity, because you're not desperately trying to fill a painful void in your self-worth.
You are simply pouring creative energy out from a cup that is already inherently full.
To ground this in a recognizable experience, think about a specific moment in your own life when you were completely, totally absorbed in a task.
A state of pure, uninterrupted psychological flow where 3 solid hours felt like 3 short minutes.
We all have those moments. For you listening, maybe it was painting a large canvas, or writing an elegant piece of code.
Or spending hours gardening, or meticulously cooking a complex meal, or playing a musical instrument.
Think about the exact cognitive state of that moment. Were you actively thinking?
Were you heavily analyzing your intrinsic worth, harshly criticizing your technique, and deeply worrying about how the future audience would perceive the final product?
Neurologically speaking, no. In a state of true flow, a phenomenon known as transient hypofrontality occurs.
The analytical, evaluating part of the prefrontal cortex literally powers down.
The active, exhausting verb of thinking vanishes completely. You are simply doing.
The complex action was unfolding through you without the heavy, abrasive friction of self-judgment.
In that moment, you weren't identifying as the struggling pieces on the board.
No, you're operating as the board itself, allowing the game to unfold naturally and beautifully. That is the essence of unconditional creation.
It is a beautifully elegant concept, but I can already hear the pragmatic skeptics formulating their counterarguments.
Oh, for sure.
They'll say, sure, it is easy to create unconditionally and slip into a Zen flow state when I'm planting tomatoes in my garden on a lazy Sunday afternoon.
But what about when the real-world stakes are incredibly high?
Right. What about when I am stepping into a boardroom to pitch a crucial Series A funding round, or performing a complex surgery, or stepping onto the field for a championship game? Doesn't peak performance require intense, active thinking?
The performance data reveals the exact opposite.
It does.
Yes. The highest performers in any given field, elite Olympic athletes, groundbreaking scientific inventors, master musicians, do not achieve their greatest work by thinking harder and analyzing more than their competitors.
They achieve their greatest work when they completely step out of the analytical, evaluating mind and drop entirely into pure, thoughtless, trained execution.
That perfectly aligns with sports psychology. If an Olympic gymnast, midair during a complex vault routine, suddenly starts actively thinking about the biomechanics of her ankle placement or the judge's score, she crashes.
The act of thinking is a massive liability.
The The gold medal performance occurs when she fully trusts her thousands of hours of training, completely silences the analytical noise, and simply allows the body to flow through the movement.
Without the heavy interference of active thinking, we are suddenly free from the rigid limitations and fears of the ego.
We gain access to a much deeper, faster, more intuitive capacity that is entirely suffocated when the thoughtometer is constantly revving in the red zone.
So if the ultimate objective is to reliably access this state of flow, this deep inspiration and this intuitive inner wisdom, how do we actually do it?
Especially when the modern environment around us is so chaotic, loud, and demanding.
The constant pinging of our smartphones, the 24-hour news cycle, the demands of our careers.
Yeah.
How do we tap into that deep, quiet well of answers when the world is screaming at us to panic?
The foundational step is realizing that our intuition, that profound pattern recognizing inner wisdom, is always broadcasting.
It's a constant signal.
But we simply cannot hear it. We cannot receive the transmission if our cognitive bandwidth is entirely consumed by the loud, clanging noise of active, anxious thinking.
We have to deliberately create space.
It is the classic principle. You cannot pour fresh water into a cup that is already overflowing with mud.
We have to empty the cup. And here is perhaps the most deeply relieving insight from all the materials we have synthesized today.
What's that?
You do not have to work incredibly hard to achieve peace.
Peace is not a distant, mythical destination you have to hike toward through years of grueling effort.
Our baseline physiological and psychological state, our default factory setting as human beings, before the cognitive noise takes over, is actually joy, peace, and clarity.
We fundamentally misunderstand the mechanics of peace. We assume peace is a structure we must actively manufacture through intense effort, complex routines, or sheer willpower.
But homeostasis tells us that peace is simply what naturally remains when we stop doing the specific thing that is constantly disturbing it.
When we cease the active, frantic overthinking, the mind's natural clarity rises to the surface entirely on its own.
I want to utilize one last, highly visual, everyday analogy to solidify this mechanism.
I love analogies. Go ahead.
Imagine you take a clear glass and scoop up water from a muddy puddle on the street.
Okay, got it.
The water in the glass is entirely brown, aggressively swirling with dirt, silt, and debris. Now, if your objective is for that water to become perfectly clear, what is your strategy?
Do you stick your finger into the glass and constantly, frantically stir it, trying to manually push the individual particles of dirt to the bottom?
Do you shake the glass violently, fighting the mud and demanding it clear up?
If you apply that active, forceful strategy, the kinetic energy will ensure the water stays cloudy and turbulent forever.
Exactly. If you want the muddy water to clear, you do not actually do anything.
You simply take the glass, set it down firmly on the table, take a step back, and wait. You leave it completely alone.
And naturally, without a single ounce of effort or manipulation from you, gravity simply takes over.
The dirt slowly, methodically settles to the bottom of the glass all on its own, and the water at the top becomes perfectly, crystal clear.
The human mind operates on the exact same principles of physics and homeostasis.
When you are facing a seemingly impossible logistical or emotional problem, and your mind is completely clouded with anxiety, fear, and frantic overanalysis, you are actively shaking the muddy glass.
The harder you analyze, the cloudier and more turbulent the cognitive water becomes.
But when you intentionally step away from the desk, when you go take a walk outside and deliberately leave your phone behind,
When you take a long, hot shower, or simply stand quietly at the kitchen sink and mindfully wash the dishes, paying attention to the temperature of the warm water on your hands.
in those moments, you are setting the glass down. You are interrupting the rumination cycle.
You're creating a gap in the noise.
Yeah.
You're allowing a bit of necessary nothingness into the system.
And neurologically, it is precisely in that empty space, when the default mode network settles down and the insight networks can finally fire, that sudden clarity arrives.
That is exactly when the miraculous aha moments strike.
The elegant solutions you couldn't possibly force with 6 hours of grinding at a whiteboard just drop quietly and perfectly into your conscious awareness.
The wisdom was always residing in your brain's architecture. It just needed the turbulence to settle so the signal could get through.
I want to extend a very specific challenge to you, the listener, to run an empirical experiment on yourself tomorrow morning.
I'm intrigued. What's the experiment?
Observe exactly what happens if you intentionally delay shaking the muddy glass. When you first wake up, do not immediately reach for your smartphone.
Oh, that's hard for a lot of people.
It is, but don't instantly flood your brain with the news cycle or dive into your work emails. Allow your mind to remain an empty cup for just 10 or 15 minutes.
Let the water be clear. Feel the physical sensation of your feet resting on the floor.
See what kind of natural inspiration or quiet motivation organically bubbles up when you don't instantly rev the thought-o-meter straight into the red zone the second you open your eyes.
Because when we finally internalize that the vast majority of our psychological suffering is essentially a mirage, a heavy, simulated storm created entirely by our own overactive, unmonitored thinking, we suddenly reclaim an immense, almost unbelievable amount of wasted metabolic and emotional energy.
We literally free ourselves from our own internal prisons.
We step completely out of the chronic exhaustion of trying to micromanage and control every aspect of life as if it were a constant looming threat.
And we finally begin to engage with life as it was originally meant to be experienced, as a fluid, unfolding, highly responsive adventure.
Let's bring this all the way back to the very beginning. You are sitting at that exact same small, wobbly wooden table in the busy, sunlit coffee shop.
The espresso smells just as rich, the ceramic mugs are still clinking in the background.
But this time, instead of spiraling into a breathless panic attack about the future, you just stop. You intentionally feel the solid, unmoving ground beneath your shoes.
You notice the comforting, radiating warmth of the mug against your palms.
You notice a heavy, dark thought about your career pop into your consciousness. But instead of aggressively analyzing it, instead of throwing a massive stake to the tiger, you just calmly observe it.
You remember that you are the vast, solid chessboard, not the tiny, fragile piece.
The thought is just a temporary cloud passing through the vast, expansive sky of your mind. You don't feed the tiger. You don't pick up the heavy rope to fight the monster.
You just watch the cloud float by, and inevitably, as all thoughts do, it eventually dissipates and disappears.
And as it fades, you feel the physical tension completely melt from your shoulders and jaw. You take a slow, deep breath, and you are finally, truly just sitting there enjoying your coffee.
It serves as a truly remarkable testament to the deep resilience and capacity of the human spirit.
It really does.
The profound peace that we spend decades of our lives frantically searching for outside of ourselves, in promotions, in relationships, in bank accounts, has actually been sitting quietly inside our own biology the entire time, just patiently waiting for the mud to settle.
So as we wrap up this exploration, I want to leave you with one final provocative question to ponder in your own quiet space today.
I love a good question to end on.
If you truly deeply believed that your natural biological default setting was absolute peace, and that every complex answer, every piece of insight and wisdom you will ever need is already waiting quietly inside you, what heavy rope would you finally be willing to drop today?